Ole Prahan, Ole Pie. Ole Pie Nislametabilo. Ipona Nakwana Nindio. Kupiripa. Bojana Nindeo. Ole pienis lo etamilo, Boganyagwe ananindeyo. Ole pran, ole pie. Onesperi lamna ke togyo, iskanan wo puerin perin pa. Ole pran, ole pie. O kanane au iskanan we, kujiro en kwalog nandrum yagwe. Ole pran, ole pie. Ole pie mitzlo etamilo, Boganyagwe abnanindeyo. Koperipa, Bojananindeyo. Ole pie mitzlo etamilo, Boganyagwe abnanindeyo. Ole pran, ole pie. Ole pran, ole pie. Ole pran, ole pie. Welcome, 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 everybody. It's good to see you. Good to see you. Oh, welcome to our newcomers. Bula Eldin. Hi, Elise. Hi, Mael, John Fox, and Friedman. Welcome. Brother Dan, welcome, welcome. Hey, Sishong Eileen. Samantha, welcome. Gemma, welcome. Welcome, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone's doing well. Please, please, please bear with us just a few more minutes as some people are slowly coming in. I know it's big time differences from all around the world, but thank you all for coming online. Brother Christian, Bula, welcome, welcome, welcome. Bula. Hope everyone's doing well. Georgia, welcome. Hey. Oh, hi. Few more minutes. Please bear with us. Please bear with us. I'll do one more song just to welcome everyone into this space. Hope everyone's doing well. Pakatere natokera ue tokupiko hanga kinaru kie viru maua takumoe hanga uakitea te marangia taku kahaya Wapeke koterangi kirunga hitoku kainga horo horo tamariki kirunga kirunga kite piringa wakatere tere natukira ue tokupiko hanga kinaru kie viru viru maua takumoe hanga uakitea te marangia taku kahaiai tie wapeke koterangi kirunga hitoku kainga horo horo tamariki kirunga kirunga kite piringa kirunga kirunga kite piringa. Hey, welcome, 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 everybody. Hope everyone's having a good time. Hope everyone's doing well. Bula Bula Raphael, Andrew Bell, Serum Bula, Marcus Blake, Bula Bula. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Awesome. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to our webinar. Just a few housekeeping rules before we begin. Could we ask if participants just wanted to ask to let you know that our event is currently being recorded, and for all of our participants to please keep your mic on mute when we have our established panelists and our keynote speaker when they speak. Also to introduce yourselves and raise questions in our chat when we come into the section of our talanoa. You'll be able to answer questions from the audience, answers from the audience after the discussion posed by our keynote speaker. Also, we've planned for our webinar to be around an hour, but because I know everyone's a bit familiar with island time, we're gonna keep the talanoa going a little bit over time, or maybe till the early morning or till the late evening. But just know that we're on island time and we may go a little bit over time. And so my name is John Taukare, and I will be our moderator for this evening. And before we start, I wanted to share a really, really close piece of mine that was a really close piece. It's a song, it's an original, and it came from a chant that was written by one of my close chiefs from the island of Rutuma. And the chant goes, Tior tior lalonga taurang, Capta Yasemen Hutch, Kaupiauta e Saltwater, Volu Hoi Kafan. And what that means in the days of our ancestors when they voyaged, they would use the elements to navigate the ocean until they saw land. The captain with his with his crew on board the Vakas, the Tafanga. And while they were voyaging, you know, as strong as the waves were, they would stay strong on their course until they reached the end of their voyage. And this song came out from that, and I wanted to share this piece with you all. Hope you guys enjoy it. And then from there we go straight in. Ancient stars our journey calls, vast as the waves we stand tall. Sails unfurl, we chase the dawn, embracing the ocean once and for all. I see island shores and distant lands, ancestral dreams hand in hand. The currents flow with stories deep. Every heartbeat Oceania, she speaks to me. Rising the depths of bright and regions of fire deeper still. Rise up, oh voyages, bold and free. Through the tides of time we'll sail the sea. With courage strong we'll chart our way. Reviving the oceans, come what may. Reviving the oceans, come what may. Here I stand, grounded and strong in the heart of the ocean where I belong. With every wave, our legacy grows. This is the world we chose. Rising from the depths of bright regions of fire deeper still. Rise up, oh voyages, bold and free. Through the tides of time we'll sail the sea. Courage strong will chart our way, providing the oceans come what may. Reviving the oceans come what may. Tur la longa tauran, kepta ya se manhat. Tur la longa tauran, kepta ya se manhat. Kopia ta isol wota, bigma vol hobi kafan, kepta ya se manhat. Rise up, oh voyages, bold and free. Through the tides of time we'll sail the sea. With courage strong we'll chart away. Reviving the oceans, come what may. Reviving the oceans, come what may. Mm. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, as I said, my name is John Taukave. I'll be a moderator for the today's webinar, Navigating Consensus and Breaking Down the Six-Pack Plus Submissions to ISWG-GHG 18. I'd firstly like to start by acknowledging our esteemed panelists who are here with us to share their expertise and their insights. Captain Daniel Adams, CEO of the Seychelles Maritime Safety Authority, John Kartoke, our legal advisor and drafter on our team, Atina Schutz, also our legal advisor and drafter, and Pierre-Jean Bordandi, associate researcher. Please give a hand for our esteemed panelists. Thank you. And of course, now I wanted to welcome our keynote speaker, His Excellency Ambassador Albany Shoda, Special Envoy for Maritime Decarbonization for the Marshall Islands. Welcome, welcome, and thank you so much for your time. Today's webinar will also unpack the Six-Pack Plus submissions to ISWG-GHG 18, focusing on two key elements, the proposed GHG levy and the revenue disbursement mechanisms. Both are critical steps in achieving a just and equitable transition in the maritime industry. And we'll start first with the keynote address, and then we'll move to our panelists for a discussion and talano, and then we'll conclude with an audience Q&A session. Please, if you have any questions questions or comments, please put it in the chat, and I'll make sure to acknowledge you and give you the floor when it comes to our Q&A. Without further ado, Ambassador Albany Shoda, the space is yours. Komoldata.
Thank you, John, for the introduction, and thank you all for being here today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night to those of us joining in from across the time zones. It's really nice to be back in this space with, of course, the good facilitation, brilliant facilitation, I might add, of our facilitator, John Taukave. Thank you for the songs. And thank you for setting the tone of our webinar this morning. Happy New Year's to those that I haven't seen this year, and Happy Lunar New Year to those who celebrated. John, I speak to our audience today, not just as a diplomat, but as a grandfather, as a father, as a son, as a community member of a nation on the front lines of climate change. So these conversations and this moment is really personal to me, but not just to me, but to many of us. We have proposed a universal mandatory greenhouse gas levy for international shipping. This is not an abstract concept. It is a practical solution designed to bridge the cost gap between traditional fossil fuels and zero emissions alternatives. The revenue generated from this levy is intended to fund the transition to cleaner energy and to combat the climate impacts of shipping's past practices. But let's confront the reality. Setting ambitious targets is meaningless without the right actions to implement them. We need effective measures that do not encourage a patchwork of inequitable regional mechanisms favoring the largest shipping and trading nations. The disbursement mechanism is equally critical. It ensures that funds collected are utilized to support those most affected by climate change, particularly small islands, developing states, and the least developed countries. This is about equity and justice, principles that must underpin our collective efforts. Now I pose these questions to all stakeholders. Are we truly committed to implementing a GHG levy that reflects the urgency of the climate crisis? Do we have the resolve to establish a disbursement mechanism that ensures fairness and equity for all nations, especially those most vulnerable? Before I hand over back to you, John, I'd like to add that our journey to MEPC 83 has been a challenging one. For over a decade, we have worked tirelessly to navigate the labyrinth of consensus building in the International Maritime Organization, facing great oppositions, forging alliances, and finding common ground where none seemed possible. The six-pack plus submissions represent the culmination of countries' hours of debate, negotiation, and compromise. Each word in these proposals carefully weighted to balance ambition with feasibility, justice, and practicality. But let us be clear. Each time we compromise, it is not just a financial setback. For us, compromise means a lost loved one, as rising seas consumed our homes, a lost community displaced by climate chaos, a lost culture as traditions tied to our island's fate, and ultimately a lost future. Every consensus feels deeply personal because for the Pacific, these decisions are not abstract. They are a matter of life and death. The debate leading to this point have tested our resolve. We have fought to ensure that the GHG levy is not diluted into irrelevance, arguing for it as a necessary step to bridge the cost gap between fossil fuels and sustainable alternatives. We have insisted that the disbursement mechanism must prioritize the most vulnerable, ensuring that no country or community is left behind in this transition. These proposals have not been easy to defend in the face of powerful opposition, but they are rooted in fairness, equity, and a shared responsibility for our planet. The time for decisive action is now. We must stand fast behind our submission. Our survival depends on it. MEPC 83 offers us a chance to take bold, uncompromising steps toward a just and sustainable future, not just for the Pacific, but the whole world. We are on the precipice of a decision that will define our legacy. Let us rise to meet this occasion with the urgency and courage it demands. Thank you, everyone, once again for joining us. And JT, I hand it back to you.
Komol, Ambassador, thank you so much for laying the groundwork and setting the stage and sounding the challenge that of the importance of why these discussions are important and leading up into ISWG and to MEPC 83, really key points. We wanted now, let's dive deep into the details of the submissions with our expert panelists who have been instrumental as drafters, negotiators, and outreach leaders. Again, we have Captain Daniel Adams, CEO of the Seychelles Maritime Safety Authority, Brother John Kautoke, legal advisor and drafter, Ms. Athena Schutz, legal advisor and drafter, and associate researcher Pierre-Jean Bordondi. Thank you, panelists, again. Our discussion will focus on two key questions. One, do we have enough support for the GHG levy, and do we have sufficient consensus for the disbursement mechanism? Now, let's focus on the first one, the GHG levy. This one I wanted to reach out to you, Captain Adams. You know, the GHG levy has been described as a straightforward and equitable mechanism to decarbonize shipping. Now, from your perspective, what makes this levy so essential to achieving IMO's climate goals? Over to you, Captain.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minister. Yeah, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Good morning from the Seychelles. It's midnight here. So yeah, the point of the levy, it's not to seek revenue for the small island states or the people who are asking for it. It's to try to incentivize the fund new fuels, new technologies, and the necessary capacity building in developing this. And it's before my time in 2020, when the six-pack first brought this up, the levy was 100. Now it's 150. And the closer it goes to the target, the higher the levy will go to. It is absolutely critical that the principle of polluter pays, it is just an equitable solution. Part of the measures will be regarding transparency, how we're going to use it properly. But the significant point of having this levy is to have a climate fund that is designed to research shipping more efficient, research the different technologies that, if the fuel is not 100% carbon neutral, can there be technologies on board that can then trap that remaining carbon on there as we are going through the transition? You know, the research, the necessary capacity building. So it's so important to have a levy with a global fuel standard, because it becomes a way that the ship owners will go, okay, we're using this levy for developing technologies. We're going to our ships are going to transition to this green fuel. It's a way of having the resources for small island states to go access this type of goods, to allow them to develop the infrastructure to accept these vessels. So the way that we use it is all interconnected, interlinked. So we have the fuel sources for international shipping, yes, but it also needs to be used for developing locally certain infrastructures. You know, you've got coastal trades, you've got international trades, and it all ties in, because there's no point having zero emission international fuel when it comes to the local ships. They are all burning heavy fuels. So, you know, how do we disperse this is another one of the biggest challenges. But it's not about asking for money. It's about asking for the necessary resources to ensure our survival. It's asking for the necessary resources to get to that 2050 target. And it's no point you know, we talk about 2050, but 2050 is so far away. But the longer we delay, the steeper the curve. And we need to start acting now. People need to start understanding that it's not about the 2050 target. It's about the midterm measures between 2030. This is the target. If we do not reach the target in 2030, there will be stricter targets for 2040 to reach the 2050 target. So we are going along a path necessary to achieve that in developing more fuel efficient ships, more fuel efficient ships, more different technologies for things like batteries on board ships. How do batteries play? Then you got to look at the seafarers actually on board the ships. They're going to be working with these. What type of safety measures, what type of training do they need? And all of this levy is designed for that. And to do that, you need to have the transparency, you need to have the upskilling, you need to have the capacity building, you need to have the fuels, you need to have the technologies, and you need everybody going, this levy is there to design that as a whole. It's not about, yes, it's about small island states, but it's about every single nation. Because we're all on one boat together. We're all on one passage together. And it's not even about us now. It is about our families in the future. It's about the next generation and the generation after that. What world are we going to leave with them? So it's all encompassing. We need the levy to ensure this, and it is the most do that, because, you know, think about it this way: it is the small island states that are saying we absolutely need this levy, and it's the small island states that are so far off the beaten path that the cost to living will rise because of the levy. But it is still them saying, it is still us saying, we still, at the end, it's not going to cost. That should be something that people need to understand. If it's us who's asking for this levy, us who will be paying for this levy in regards to the economy, you are, you know, we need to, this is the thing that we need to think about. Nation, shipping costs will increase, but at the end of the day, there's a greater cost that we are willing to go. So for me, yeah, the levy is absolutely necessary. It's 100% necessary to incentivize, to move forward, to reach those targets. And if we do not start acting now, it's just going to pile up, and the levy, you know, it's gone from 100. If we delay much longer, it's going to go from 150 to 300, and the increase of the levy is going to be exponential to build that resources and the capital necessary for the training, for the development of the fuels and the technologies and everything else that revolves around this.
Captain, thank you so much for providing your insights. I think those are critical insights about the importance of the levy. You know, you've provided that, you know, the view of what it means for small island states like the Seychelles. I wanted to move to Miss Athena on. Athena, do you believe that the global community has rallied enough support for this levy? Or what kind of challenges have you experienced or encountered in building consensus towards this levy?
Thank you very much, John, for giving me the floor. Before I start, I'd like to first thank Ambassador for his very rousing address, and I'd also like to thank and acknowledge my fellow panelists. So, our team has actually spent a good portion of the time after MEPC 82 up until towards the end of last year to work with other levy proponents to consolidate our proposals. And so these other proponents are the EU, Japan, Bahamas, Liberia, and the International Chamber of Shipping. It was a very successful exercise for the team. They produced draft MARPOL amendments to a new Chapter 5 on the economic element of the basket of measures. After the draft was finalized, extensive outreach was undertaken to gain more support for the document. So before I go further, the document, we've already made the submission to IMO. So it's actually a consolidated MARPOL text of all the different options and different options with options for levies and its uses. So we're very happy to report that our collective submission on that is sponsored by a wide range of countries from varying situations. So we have a mix of developed countries, developing countries, SIDS and LDCs, and it also includes 7 of the 10 main flag states, representing around 80% of the world's merchant tonnage. Our submission has over 51 co-sponsors with additional supporters who have pledged support on the floor. And this is a very historic achievement that we can all be proud of. And we also have a name. We are calling ourselves the Group of 50 Plus. So this goes to show, the amount of increasing support to have a universal GHG pricing. So just to add on to your point on building consensus, so there is already consensus that there will be a maritime GHG pricing mechanism. Our large and diverse co-sponsorship are of the firm belief that it should be a flat rate universal GHG levy or contribution. So to that end, the proposed text on our proposed MARPOL text on the levy, we feel that moves us closer towards convergence on the basket of measures. In addition, we also have in that text some consolidated options on the quantum, so the pricing of the levy and the revenue disbursement. So, which generally includes rewards for incentivizing the fleet, funding for research, development, and deployment, supporting the energy transition in developing countries, including SIDS and LDCs, and addressing the disproportionately negative impacts of the measures that will be implemented, as well as reparation for climate impacts of international shipping. So all those potential options are reflected in that text. So to answer your question, do we have enough support for this levy? We could use more and more support as much as we need, but we do recognize we have a large group of countries and they're quite diverse. And we're still in the process of trying to build a consensus and working towards that as we move closer to MEPC 83. But with, in more intense outreach and with having more information sharing on this, we can feel confident that we can get closer to that. Thank you.
Komal, thank you, Atina, for that, for sharing those. I think the great work that our team has been building up in terms of outreach and reaching out to all, member states for the support of the submissions. And kudos to you and the drafting team for that. Thank you for that. Thank you for that insight. Now, from the levy, we now move into the revenue disbursement, trying to ensure a just and equitable transition. And I wanted to now give the space to Toko. Brother John, the disbursement mechanism is critical for addressing the disproportionate impacts, especially for SIDS and LDCs. Now, how does the current proposals ensure equity in fund allocation? Brother, I give to you.
Thanks, John. And thank you to also panelists and His Excellency for opening up. It's always good to be on these webinars. If I may, John, I'm just going to take it back just a little bit for some of our guests. I know not all of us involved here are part of this call, are part of the GHG negotiations really closely. So I just want to take it back just a little bit, just so for their benefit. So there are discussions going on at the IMO for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from international shipping. International shipping is what the IMO regulates. It's a UN agency. These discussions are taking place under the Marine Environment Protection Committee, which has the mandate to deal with all the environmental impacts of international shipping. One of the conventions that sits under the MEPC is the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships. For short, it's called MARPOL. MARPOL has 6 annexes which deal with various areas from pollution from ships. And the discussion that we're having right now to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from international shipping is being undertaken in Annex 6 of MARPOL, which covers the prevention of air pollution from ships. And greenhouse gases, of course, constitute air pollution. Right now, we're trying to come up with measures which will decarbonize international shipping and drive the energy transition for international shipping. We agreed in 2023 within the IMO revised strategy that we'd come up with solutions composed of 2 measures, and that's a technical measure, which is a global fuel standard, and an economic measure, which is on the basis of a GHG pricing mechanism. So far in the progress of the debates, there has been the number of solutions from member states have been narrowed down to generally 4 broad proposals. The first proposal is the Six-Pack Pluses proposal, which considers a high levy plus a global fuel standard, and a simple global fuel standard at that. The second proposal is from Bahamas et al., who are broadly representing the industry. They also propose a levy, a low levy, plus a simple global fuel standard. The third proposal is from our European colleagues, and they also consider a levy, a high levy, plus a global fuel standard with a credit trading element. And then you have the proposal from the BRICS countries, which only considers a credit trading system. So those are the 4 broad proposals on the table, and you can recognize that 3 of the 4 consider a levy. And so we know, and I agree with Atina, there is a growing consensus that a levy is the solution that will decarbonize international shipping and also meet all the goals and objectives of the strategy, which the IMO has agreed to. So in recognition of that fact, the proponents of a levy, as I mentioned, it was Bahamas, Liberia, ICS, the EU, and the Six-Pack countries. They came together to consolidate their amendments to MARPOL Annex 6 into a single document, and that is now contained within a submission which has been submitted to the IMO for the 18th Intersessional Working Group on the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from ships. So that's one of the submissions which the Six-Pack is supporting and has helped draft. We also have 3 other submissions. So the second submission has to do with the revenue disbursement element, which the Pacific and some of the industry actors believe would be the minimum towards achieving a just and equitable transition. You may have heard that the phrase mentioned quite often, a just and equitable transition. The IMO is now committed towards achieving a just and equitable transition. So we have categories of revenue disbursement. It's also important to recognize that all the proposals at the table consider the collection of some revenue. The magnitude of revenue differs depending on the measures, but all of the measures collect revenues. And all the main proponents have agreed that the disbursement of those revenues, or the use of those revenues, is important towards the transition as well. So we have in that submission the disbursement purposes, which is important for us for achieving a just and equitable transition. And we have it co-sponsored with industry actors. We also have a submission on the goal of the amendments to MARPOL, and we think it's very important for the IMO to agree a unified goal for what we're trying to achieve with the MARPOL regulations. And That's also co-sponsored by a broad number of countries, and we're still hoping to get more support from that. And the language for that goal is taken directly from the strategy. So it's a language that has already been agreed to by the IMO. I mean, in particular, the language speaks to what the midterm measures need to achieve. So those three categories are in that submission. There's also a fourth submission on the fund. We had a lengthy discussion or some discussion at the last committee amongst member states, and broadly there is agreement that a fund needs to be set up. It's just the details of that fund and what the structure is and all that needs to be finalized, but there is general agreement that a fund needs to be set up. So those are the four submissions that we've submitted from the six-pack side. I think we talk about the revenue disbursement. The revenue disbursement does remain, it's a byproduct of the regulation, right? So the core of our proposal is that we want a 1.5 aligned transition. And in order to achieve that, we need to decarbonize international shipping as quickly as possible to keep within the 1.5 temperature goal. So we need a high price on international shipping if we want to decarbonize quickly and also to transition quickly to the new fuels and the new technologies that we need to sustain the transition in the long term. So that's why we're proposing the 150, and that's why we have been proposing a high price on international shipping, is to keep the 1.5 target alive. As a result of that, a high price means that there will be a high amount of revenue that will be generated as a result of the regulation. And so we believe that the revenues are best used towards achieving a just and equitable transition, which, as I mentioned, the IMO member states have agreed to achieving. And a just and equitable transition requires a great deal of resourcing and investment to achieve. So we need to put those byproduct revenues towards achieving a just and equitable transition. And the Pacific and SIDS have been the main proponents of a just and equitable transition. I think those who were at the negotiations in 23 realized how difficult it was to get those principles inserted within the strategy, but we managed to get it in. And so as the main proponents of a just and equitable transition, it's only natural that those proponents also helped define what a just and equitable transition means. And we're hoping that the proposal on the just and equitable disbursement will show what we need to be putting the money towards if we want to make sure that the transition is just and equitable. And part of that is making sure that the transition is global in nature, to make sure that the opportunities generated by the transition are global. The developing countries, SIDS and LDCs, who have the potential to lead the transition, also benefit from it. Part of that is also ensuring that international shipping takes account of its impact and its contribution to the climate crisis. That's particularly true for SIDS and LDCs, who are some of the countries who experience the highest impacts of climate change, which international shipping has contributed to. And part of the international shipping's responsibility needs to extend to the impacts it has, as it already recognizes on the other impacts of international shipping, environmental impacts of international shipping. GHG contribution is also an impact of international shipping. And there are countries that are already suffering those impacts. But there's also very important, and Captain Daniel mentioned it, the importance of ensuring that the workforce is taken ahead in the transition as well. These are the people who will make sure that the transition happens. We're the people who make the policy, but they're the ones every day who are going to be operating the vessels, who are going to be dealing with bunkering and all these very technical and dangerous tasks. And with the changing technology, the danger will only increase if we don't make sure that they receive the proper training and support that they require to make sure that the transition happens for the whole world. And so part of a just transition is ensuring that the maritime workforce gets the support that they require.
Yeah.
There's also this issue of disproportionate negative impacts. We do recognize that any regulation may have disproportionate negative impacts on member states. And we believe that these disproportionate negative impacts need to be taken full account of, and they need to be compensated where possible. Especially, but not to all. You know, there are some states that are better placed to deal with negative impacts than others, and those that cannot, and those who are already starting at a very, very low baseline will need absolute support for the disproportionate negative impacts, and we think that those countries need to receive that support. That's all. I just wanted to take it back a little bit for those attending, and any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thanks.
Malo Toko, thank you for bringing everyone, bringing us back a little bit to get a full grasp of the whole negotiations at hand about the revenue disbursement. Really helps. You mentioned about the fund, and I wanted to give space now to Pierre-Jean about this fund. What are the steps needed to operationalize, the GHG strategy implementation fund to ensure transparency in this in the revenue distribution? PJ?
Talofa, and good day to all. So unless interrupted, I'll just assume that you can all hear me.
Loud and clear, brother.
Great. I also thanks again to you to always chair these webinars in the fashion you do. It's always making a very pleasant environment. So great thanks to you. Thanks also to Ambassador Ishoda for always guiding us through his insightful introductory speech, and for obviously Captain Adam also, and my fellow panelists. Now, your question is actually very central here, and I believe, in fact, Ambassador Ishoda gave already some elements of answer to this question, but it's important, I think, to come back on some of the points here. The key message here is that even with the best economic measure adopted and in place by the IMO, there will be no equitable transition of international shipping if it is not accompanied by the necessary tool to implement these measures, such as a fund, in that instance. So in that respect, it is critical, therefore, that the IMO adopts concurrently to the measures the adequate tools and governing instrument for a fund that will handle practical implementation of the measures. So this means setting up a fund, adopting the governing instrument for that fund before the entry into force of the measures, so that the fund can in turn prepare itself and adopts its own process and procedures to handle, manage, and disperse the revenues. So this is why, as John mentioned a minute ago, the six-pack has made a submission articulating the urgency of a fund and the importance of adequate timeline for the creation of such a fund. And so this is a topic that hasn't been really discussed so far in the negotiations. It has been put a bit on the side because there was a lot of other important elements to discuss. But we are now at the critical juncture where this is going to have to be resolved fairly quickly. And as far as the second part of your question is concerned, namely the transparency, it will be obviously important to ensure that in the governing instrument itself, we have adequate check and balance mechanism in place, so that the fund itself then can adopt the adequate process to verify and to handle and disperse revenue. So this is, in essence, this various steps that need to happen in a certain chronology and in a certain fashion, and this work needs to commence fairly urgently. So this is why we've been working on the submissions, and we've articulated those first 4 submissions, as John explained to us all a minute ago. And those submissions obviously are more or less interlocked, even though they don't necessarily always have the same co-sponsor. So anyway, thank you, John, for once again pertinent question, and I hope my answer helped everyone to understand this and how important it is for the negotiations.
Thank you, brother. Merci. Thank you, Talofa. Thank you for sharing, bro. Just a reminder to everyone in the chat going on. If you have questions or comment, please pop them in the chat, or please raise your hand, and we'll give you space to ask your question, or just place a comment for our panelists here. I think for me, the last one I wanted to point out to all of our panelists out there was, on the 6-pack plus, the submissions. How do the 6-pack plus submissions align with the broader goals of the IMO decarbonization strategy, and what message, for this does, the Pacific leadership send to the global community, as we've been very active in this space? I wanted to put it to any one of you panelists, if you wanted to just give a few comments on that before we pass it to the audience. Don't make me choose.
I'll start, if it's okay.
Malo,
I can.
Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
Okay. No, you go ahead. We started about the same time. You go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, could you just repeat the question, just to make sure that I got it correctly?
We're looking at the 6-pack plus submissions. We've been speaking about the submissions from the Pacific. I wanted to, the 6-pack plus submissions. How do the submissions align with the broader goals of the IMO strategy? And what message does the Pacific leadership in this space send to the global community?
Yeah. Yes, I think that's. Yes, it's a good question. I think so. The IMO 2023 strategy has sets of objectives. It has temperature. It has reduction targets for the amount of GHG from ships over 2030, 2040, and 2050, and it has a final objective of reaching zero GHG emissions by 2050. And so at a minimum, I think this is what everyone at the IMO is trying to achieve. They're trying to achieve those targets. But it's not just targets that are in the strategy. It's also, there's a set of things that we've also tasked ourselves as IMO members to achieve. And that includes ensuring that no country is left behind. But that's very important. That's part of a just and equitable transition, making sure that no country gets left behind. It's very if we don't get the measures correct, it's very likely that countries will be left behind. And those countries most likely to be left behind are countries like our SIDS, especially middle and low income SIDS who are not located along developed and affluent shipping routes or far away from their markets like ours. We're also very vulnerable to climate change. And this is a climate change negotiation. So we have to make sure that we are the ones, our voice is heard in these negotiations, and we'll also be seen to take a lead in the design of the measures for these negotiations. Because when the policy takes account of the most vulnerable, it also takes account of everyone else. And so it's very important that we take lead, and we have been very vocal following RMI's leadership and the Pacific's leadership, and also our SIDS colleagues, Seychelles and Caribbean, we've all been leading for our regions in this discussion. It's very important that we do that for the reasons I mentioned. And so our submissions, we're trying to achieve all the elements of the strategy, not just the temperature, the reduction targets, but also achieving a just and equitable transition, which we have been the main proponent for. And we think that our force emissions cover that adequately. So the high price will achieve the necessary reduction, and byproduct revenues can ensure that the transition is just and equitable and truly global. Next.
Malo Toko. Then you wanted to go after JK. Once after you, then I wanted to acknowledge we have some questions and comments raised, and then I will and then I'll give it to our panelists, maybe PJ or Atina, to help navigate those questions. But Captain, you wanted to say something?
Just like John was saying, one of the biggest things that comes out of this is I took my position just over a year ago, and the Pacific Islands reached out to me, and I've been pushing locally here for us to join this, to understand the importance of this. And one of the things I would say is it's the small island states because the concept of having these 4 submissions with the amount of states going towards the and I know that there's different levels of co-sponsors, and there'll be co-sponsors at the IMO. So some of them have more co-sponsors than the others, but all 4 of this is us telling the international community that in a united voice, and we are talking about taking our fate in our hands, determining our future and the future of our generations. And this is something that for me, it's not, these are technical papers, I understand that, but there is readings below. It's a way of talking in a unified voice about how are we going to achieve this. And that to me is very critical. That's something that needs to come across about, we are the ones on the forefront. We are the ones being impacted. So it's our responsibility to tell we are coming forward. We are bringing the ideas. It's not them telling us how to transition. It is us telling them this is what we need to do. And it's that type of statement that these make. That's my perception.
Thanks, Captain. Thank you for that. I'll move to the chat. Maria Ogbugo, thank you so much for your questions. Really useful questions. Yeah. I'm just going to voice them out, and I'll give it first to...
Sorry, John, I just wanted to add just a little bit on your question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I just wanted simply to say, this is an important question in relation to the strategy, the IMO strategy. And so in 2 words, basically what I wanted to say is that the strategy is pretty much, it's an agreement of the international shipping community. That's what we've agreed to achieve. And this is against what the measures are going to be benchmarked against. And so I think we are going to hear that quite regularly on the floor during the negotiations, that when a measure is proposed, but we know it's not going to achieve the goal of the strategy, it's going to have to be modified, because the key is that the measures need to achieve the ambition of the strategy. Otherwise, it cannot be adopted. So that's what I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you, PJ. I'll move to the questions. Maria asks, I think she put 3 comments there. The first one was, I'm curious as to exactly how much consensus has been reached by the 50+ countries. Is there alignment on the amount of the levy. Then she goes, are all 50 states aligned on reparation as an element of revenue distribution? And then her last comment was, there are 120 plus countries that haven't supported this updated proposal. Were there any sticky points that got in the way of their signing up? Thank you, Maria, for those questions. I'll pass it to our panelists. I think, Atina, I'll let you go first.
Sure. Thank you, John. And thank you, Maria, for those very good questions of yours. So the way the document was structured, we have we've done our best to consolidate all our proposals, and we have options in square brackets. So in terms of alignment on amount of the levy, that's those as John had mentioned, you know, the different levy, the quantum or the pricing of the levy that's been proposed is still they're still there. So those three different amounts are still reflected in the document. Regarding reparation as an element of revenue distribution, this was a really six-pack, really trying to make sure that that really critical part of was still reflected in the document. Also, the main purpose of having that consolidated proposal together was to use that text as a basis for discussions or negotiations at the upcoming ISWG-18 and hopefully further on into moving forward to 83. And that those proposals that those who are calling for a levy do not have those get kicked out of the way, because apparently there was no convergence, when clearly we tried to demonstrate that there is a convergence as much as we could. And I also note that, I know that 120 plus countries have not supported that proposal, and we're also working to, explain to them the value of having such a measure in place. But it's also important to note that not a lot of countries are actually quite active in the IMO. They're not very vocal. So it's a matter of, just trying to, get them engaged as much as possible. So what's one of the things that we've done our best to do with the document. And I'll hand over to
JK. Yeah.
I see JK has his hand up.
JK, and then I'll give it to you, PJ. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Atina. Yeah, I do totally agree with what Atina was saying. I think the main goal with this paper is to try to get the levy across the line. Because even though 3 of the 4 major proponents are levy proponents, there's still a lot of pushback from large developing countries. And that's mainly led by the BRICS. As Atina mentioned, there's also a lot of countries who are still quiet at the IMO, still trying to figure out which measure that they would support. The time was also an issue with this submission because of the short time frame for getting those sponsors and the document being negotiated. So the time factor actually played a lot in meaning that we didn't get as many as we would have liked to. But 50 co-sponsors, I think, is quite historic at the IMO. I don't think it's normal to get that many co-sponsors on a document. And on such an issue as this issue of GHG, I think it's a very historic moment for the IMO to get 50 plus co-sponsors. There are some remaining divergences, but we hope that the text will generally reflect that there's a general consensus on the ideas around the levy. And then as we go into the negotiation, we can try to make sure that we get the most optimum option for our side as well, since we're asking the most out of these negotiations, being the most vulnerable countries. But those details, I think, will be negotiated as we go forward. We are working together within the sponsors to try to see what we can do to try to minimize some of those divergences and how they appear towards the outside. And we're doing that on the lead up and during ISWG-18. I think also just because the country is not on the list doesn't mean that it's not supporting. I think we do have some countries that are willing to support. They just didn't have time to put it through their internal processes. So there actually may be more than 50 countries supporting a levy. And that's actually down to a lot of outreach work that the proponents are doing at the moment.
Thanks, Toko. PJ?
Thank you very much, John. And look, I'll be brief because pretty much the essential has been said. But I just wanted to say that we instead of looking at the glass half full, there we should half empty. We should look at the glass half full in the sense that, as John said, this is really a historical moment. 50 plus sponsor for such a submission. And I mean, if you look at the result of the previous MEPC and at the technical measure consolidation, and now at the submission of the consolidated economic measure, we can almost argue that the consolidated economic measure is actually much more consolidated and much more streamlined than the technical measure, where there is still a substantial amount of divergence and opposition. So I think it's a major leap forward here, and we are quite optimistic that there will be a good levy out of this. Also, I suggest that it's important to have a look at who are the co-sponsor. It's not only 50 co-sponsor, but who are they? We have amongst those co-sponsor the largest ship registry in the world. That means something, and it's the same for some of the other submissions that we have there in relation to the revenue disbursement. So this is also quite critical. And as I said earlier, even though all our submissions are not sponsored by all the same, there's various reasons for that. But we can see that there is a strong voice and a growing unity towards what we're trying to do there, and a growing understanding of how this is feasible. So I hope this helped to understand. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, PJ. Thank you for those questions. Does anyone else have any comments or questions that they would like to add on before I start rounding up our Talano? Yes, Toko.
I just wanted to also address Maria's other question. Yes, these are really good questions. Thanks, Maria. And these are the type of questions that we need to be prepared for when we go into the negotiations. And we're already starting to do some thinking around how we manage those questions. I think in terms of the price, so there is a range, and all ranges within that price is possible, including the highest and the lowest ranges. And from the Pacific, we think that the 150 at this moment, we still believe that it is the price that will get us the transition that we need going into the negotiation. Of course, negotiations are negotiations, and they will take place, and it will be very heated. But I think it's the six-pack plus countries are still standing firm on the 150 as the price that will achieve the transition we need.
Thank you, Malu Toko. Ambassador, I give you the space.
Thank you, John, and thank you, every members of the panel, for your very, very good points and discussion this morning. I apologize for jumping in on here, as I understand our panelists have this under control, but I just wanted to at least put some context into some of these discussion, especially the questions that were raised by Maria. I think it's important to note that of all the submissions and of all the positions that have been put forward within the IMO and within these negotiations, I think the Pacific has been, if not the most inclusive, has created or produced the most inclusive position of all the proposals. And I say this by way of demonstrating that in the 2023 revised strategy negotiations, the Pacific went in there and fought a hot battle to ensure that equitable transition was recognized as part of the revised strategy, along with the timeline. And I think many countries across the regions of the world appreciated that we were not just there asking for hands out, or if some people call it hands out. We don't see it that way. But we were there to ensure that those most affected by and those that will be most affected by these transitions are recognized in sorry, in the revised strategy, um, including um, the amongst the least developed countries, the landlocked states. I think that has been a constant position and a consistent position of the Pacific, that we try and ensure that no state are left behind. But also within the discussions around the quantum, yes, there are some proposals on 18 plus dollars, and ours is 150, and there's a huge gap. There's a huge range between those numbers. But as JT John Kautoke has mentioned, our proposal, we feel, is the one that addresses the sustainable, equitable transition that is required under this transition. And I think those are very key important messages to take back. Also to note that members of the industry, some members of the industry have suggested and continuously suggest a $300 entry point. I think within our circles and discussing amongst our group, we feel that the entry point now that the Pacific is proposing is currently appropriate, but does not and should not limit us from ratcheting it up after reviewing it, say every 5 years. And finally, I think it's important to also recognize that, less than 5 years ago, no one within the industry or no one within IMO wanted to consider any sort of levy. So this has been a push that I think our Pacific team and our small island developing states teams have demonstrated to the rest of the world that we are in fact here to help find real solution for international shipping that addresses not only the transitional need of the industry, but also the climate impacts that shipping's past practices have created for those most vulnerable amongst us. Thank you.
Commoral Ambassador, thank you for that really good points that you raised. I will look to the chat for our final question by Sandra. Thank you so much for your question, Sandra. She asks, do you expect that the levy skeptic side react to the submission in a similar way, putting together a broadly supported submission but against it? And is there a strategy if this happens? PJ, I want to pass this to you if you have a comment on that.
Sorry, John, you got me by surprise here. Can you repeat the question?
Sandra asks, do you
Yes.
expect the levy skeptic side?
Yeah. Well, of course, we can expect a reaction from the levy skeptic side, but I think the magnitude of the support for the levy now makes it something very challenging. We are going to face certainly a very strong reaction, and we are definitely prepared for that. And we have worked and we have done research and we have worked extensively in looking at all the possible arguments, and I'm talking, when I say we here, I'm talking about the whole group of the 50 plus. I've been looking at, making sure that this consolidated text is solid for all co-sponsor. So we are ready, but I would be very surprised if the levy skeptic is able to come with a proposal that will unify as many supporters as we have been able to.
Yeah, especially for this round, there's a really big support for that. Thank you. And with that, friends, colleagues, we're already past the hour, but again, we're on island time. I wanted to start rounding up this Talano, but please, if you have any questions, do reach out to us. It's in the chat. I wanted to thank Ambassador Ishoda. Thank you so much for your keynote and for delivering it today. Also to our esteemed panelists, PJ, Captain Adams, Atina, John, thank you so much for your time. And also to each and every one of you of the participants, thank you so much for your time. Thank you all for making the time to come on into this Talana and to listen to these conversations and to know about the work that the Six Pack Plus have been doing at the IMO, consistently throughout all of the negotiations. And I think it's a good way to keep those communication lines open and be transparent about the work that we do. And now, ladies and gentlemen, to end us off again, because we're in a Pacific space, inclusivity and Talana in space, I want to end us off with a song, and I think it's a really good song that we can all relate to. And this is a song by an old song, and I hope you guys enjoy this. Here we go. It's called Rich Man, Poor Man. Oh, na, 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 yeah, yeah, yeah. Na, na, na. I see the rich man, poor man, beggar man, thief. Everyone a claim that them are the chief. The rich man buy the poor man's life. The poor man take away the beggar man's wife. Don't cry, my brothers. Don't cry, my sisters. Tears don't change the situation. It's just a form of reaction. If you take a step on the fire, fire burn ya. If you love the puppy, lick your mouth. So stand up strong. You gotta move on. So weak ones now will soon become strong. Hey, everything will soon be okay. As soon as the war is over, the children will be free to come over, singing and dancing, ready to take over. Have some faith, have a little faith. I said a rich man, poor man, beggar man, thief, everyone a claim that they be the chief. The rich man buy the poor man's wife. The poor man take away the beggar. Cry, my brothers, don't cry, my sisters. Our tears won't change the situation. It's just a form of reaction. If you step on the fire, fire burn. If you play with the puppy, lick them out. So stand up strong to know where you belong. The weak ones now will soon become strong. Hey, everything will soon be okay. As soon as the war is over, the children will be free to come over, singing and dancing, ready to take over. Have some faith, have a little faith. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. We hope you have a blessed evening, a blessed day wherever you are. Blessings, blessings, blessings. Thank you all and see you at our next webinar, and stay in touch. Thank you.